Hey everybody, how are you this evening? Nancy is stuck on a plane or trying to catch a plane or stuck in an airport or something. We're not sure where she is, but she can't join us tonight because of her travel got stuck. So I am Joanne with Fur Better for Worse Dog Training.
And I'm Lisa Bataska with Canine Defined.
So thank you for joining us tonight. This is a very exciting topic, I know, for Lisa and I. And I think some people are probably going to be tuning in because we said we were going to be talking about 4th of July, but I know we've done ones on 4th of July before, so we're hoping that this one is going to open your eyes a little bit more, not only to how to help dogs, but why it's so hard, why this time of year is so hard for some of them. So I think we kind of wanted to start talking about, we went 3 weeks ago,
Yep,
to Madison, Wisconsin, to a seminar called the Resilience Rainbow. And before we get into some of that stuff, the people who ran that is Dr. Kathy Murphy, who is a veterinarian and a neuroscientist. And then Bobby Bromby, who I believe is
she's a canine dog behavior consultant and a CPDTKA. Yeah, and she's like the training director or training person for behavior vets in New York. Yeah.
Yep. So Dr. Murphy runs something called Barking Brains, and then they both collaborate under a group called Behavior Vets. There's one in Colorado, one in New York. But I know, like, Lisa found them first, and I had heard about them. And so we both started talking, like, have you seen these new webinars that are out there? And we got very excited because, like, I know we've been doing behavior for 20 plus years now. And that's been a journey in and of itself. Like, we're always learning and continuing to learn more. But this piece of it puts the brain on top of it. Like, why does the behavior happen and what happens in the brain when the stimulus hits? And so for me, like, watching some of these webinars, it was talking about what behavioral drugs do to the brain and, like, what fear hits, like what causes fear and what parts of the brain does it hit? What happens in the gut, the microbiome of the gut? What about skin sensitivities? What about emotional, all these things? They have tons and tons and tons of them. I don't know. What have been some of your favorites, Lisa?
I guess, you know what? I guess overall, being in the dog training industry for some time, like, there is very limited information or knowledge that's given out in terms of, like, biology. Mm-hmm. And I love biology. It's been my, like, something that it's kind of like the thing people don't know about me, but it's a favorite subject and information of mine. And when I heard Dr. Kathy Murphy / Connor speak, I was like, this is the piece that's missing, like the understanding the why to be able to help the how, right? And to me, that was extremely important. Like nobody talks about that. Like, and things like, for example, like, I didn't know this, but reinforcement, whether it's a cookie or a correction, hits the brain the same way. The dopamine response is the same. The difference is the emotion behind it that you don't know, right? So this is where it becomes tricky. And, like, stuff like that, like, people don't really talk about that piece. And in dog training, it's about doing. It's about an action. It's about goal-oriented. And when I heard this, I'm like, this is what I've been, looking for. This is the piece that makes sense. And then in the current practice, I do bring that up. And I know you do as well. And people, most of the time, I don't know what your response is, but it seems like they're like, that makes sense, right? From a biological standpoint, that makes sense. So that's why I'm excited about it, because I feel like people don't follow that piece of it, and the science or biology behind it is, like, so important. It is beyond important to understand how to help the dog.
Yeah. And I feel like sometimes the skeptical people or the people who are transitioning from, really corrective types of training, and they they're always questioning, oh, that frou-frou style of dog training, or, well, how do you know that? How do you know what the dog is feeling? This is a way to say, go look it up. Like, it's a real thing. These are real emotions. We know they exist. We have science to back it up. So go look at it. I mean, you don't run across that many people who are willing to spend money on their dogs for privates, but at least in beginning obedience classes and things like that, those people do, they are still a part of the populace. So.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So Resilience Rainbow Tour. What we got so excited about was it was talking about stress and the stress cycle and what happens. And when we say stress, understand all night tonight, when we talk about stress, we're not always talking about like fireworks stress or stranger danger. We can be talking about excitement, right? I'm getting ready to do a search, or I'm getting ready to run agility, or any of those types of things. So, you know, when we talk about the word stress, understand we're talking about the chemicals in the brain, whether it's, I hate to say negative or positive, but right, whatever's happening to bring the dog's arousal up, that's what we mean by stress. And so the resilience rainbow is a term that's been coined, right, by Dr. Kathy Murphy and Bobby Bromby. So we didn't do this, right? This is them. Mm-hmm. And so they used the rainbow, and they used different titles kind of for each piece of this stress cycle. Okay. So Lisa, I know that you probably have a copy of that somewhere. Or
yeah.
You remember them.
Yeah, I do actually. Well, I'm looking at my notes currently, but for the Resilience Rainbow, so it's like 7 domains, and each of the domains are just it's information, right? So I guess when I look at this, the 7 domains are like predictability, safety, and mental and well-being. Then we have, do you remember some of them? Decompression, completing the stress cycle, predictability, I said, social support, and agency. So like agency, so each of the categories, decompression is like, and the way I compare it, and Joanne, you can like jump in, but when I've talked to people about this, decompression is kind of like when you, a couple of things. One, if you are an athlete, it's the warm up, the activity, the event, and then the cool down, right? If I'm going to work, it's my driving to work, getting to work, working on getting prepared to go do my job, seeing what's for the day, doing my job, and then going home, and then relaxing, whatever that looks like. And so I think what's interesting and what's missing, I don't know about you, but like everybody gets all attached about the arousal. Oh, you have to do arousal, self-impulse control, and stuff like that. But if the brain is not ready to accept it, then how do you even broach that topic, right? And this is the piece that's missing. Like, I was like, okay, impulse control, but I never realized the amount of stress that arousal can create depending on the situation that you're asking of the dog, right? But anyway, so those are the things. Predictability, remember the brain is designed to predict and anticipate behavior. Therefore, predictability provides a sense of safety and security. So they kind of go hand in hand. Social support is us saying, hey, you're safe, blah, blah, blah. Mental and physical well-being is overall where the dog's brain is at. We can only guess based upon the actual physical body language. So that's why all of us have been really super important. Like that's kind of like how we work our training plans, or how we work with the dog based upon that body language. So mental and physical well-being, if the dog is injured or moves funny, that can be a barometer for the behavior they are actually expressing. And
chronic pain, not put together well, all of those things, right?
Yeah. And then agency. And I think this is the thing we don't understand. Like if I restrict my dog, if they're on a leash, they don't have a choice. But if they have a choice, what do you do? And 2020 brought about a lot of this information, right? Like predictability provides a sense of security. When 2020 hit and our world went up in smokes, like everything we knew was not what we thought. And then the all of that changed. It those people who weren't resilient had a harder time recovering, had a harder time, being able to like deal with that stuff. And there was tons of psychological fallout from that. So those are some things, right, that we don't consider, but are super important. And the Resilience Rainbow, the ultimate goal of it is to be able to build that, they call it allostasis, right? The ability to be knocked off homeostasis, but yet balance your reaction, still be functional, not be overstressed, still be healthy, etc. when you're knocked off of off balance.
Mm-hmm. And, when you think about some of these things, like I always try to use real life stuff so that people can relate, right? Because we get a little nerdy sometimes because we know exactly what we're talking about. But like, I'll give you an example of like a really well perfected art of that. I have been rewatching the series of Jack Ryan on Amazon Prime because I love that series. It's CIA operatives and blah blah blah. And so you watch some of these scenes, right? And they're walking and all of a sudden somebody shoots at them and they have a big shootout and then they're like, okay, let's go. Right. And so it's like, when you think about stuff like that happens, it's like you almost died. The world is exploding around you. And so you're at a peak of life or death, like no safety and security at that moment. And then you watch and granted it's movies, but you have to assume some of this happens in war and those types of things too, right? Like you have to come back immediately or you're putting yourself at further risk and danger, right? So when you think about people who have perfected the cycle of ups and downs, those people who are put in life and death situations like soldiers, and not all of them, right? But when you have special forces, right? Like those people get to those positions because they show a great not knowledge, but like a great aptitude of being able to be hit with super stressful and then being able to come back down from it very quickly. Right. And then you think about what happens when you're faced, like, let's talk wartime, right? We talk soldiers. What about the people who are sitting in that zone? Right. So for 2 weeks, you're faced with soldiers outside your house and bombs being dropped and like, you don't get to come down from that stress cycle, but your body cannot maintain that for long enough, right? So like, how could you be sleeping during that? Because I'm going to die if I don't. I need to recharge, right? And so I don't know if you're okay with it, but like, we're going to talk about like the HPA axis, if you don't mind. Can I like do a little explanation of it?
Absolutely.
Please. All right, so I'll read it so I don't go off on a tangent here. But the HPA axis stands for the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. Okay. And so what it is the hypothalamus in the brain, okay, talks to the pituitary gland, which sits at the base of the brain. And then that talks to the adrenal glands, which sit on the kidneys. Okay. And basically, in a nutshell, what that does is the brain says, hey, something's happening. Hey, pituitary, you better stimulate the adrenal glands. The adrenal glands produce cortisol, right? And I think even at a basic level, we all know cortisol is always referred to as the stress hormone, right? If your dog has Cushing's, Addison's, I believe it is. Anyway, one of those has like, it produces too much cortisol in the brain. That's one of the tests that they do. But so when all these things start firing off, right, now it's in your body, it's in the bloodstream. It doesn't just float away. Your body has to reabsorb that and process it. And so that's part of what we're talking about is once those things fire off, do you just wait? Or are there thank you, Tina Cushing's. So, or are there things that you can do that can actually help process that stuff out quicker? And there are. So, and that's, you'll hear us get to talk about the fireworksy thing later, but this is going to pertain to all levels of stress. So I know, Lisa, you want to talk about HPA a little bit more.
No, it's just, yeah, I think it's, and some people run at a higher level of stress than others, right? Some people are stressy, and you want to think about that. And I think from a body language standpoint, lots of people get arousal and energy confused. And I think the difference is this piece, right? So if I'm stressed out, my behavior is way different. My body language is way different than if I'm not stressed, right? And I think that's the big tell. And I think also what happens is we think when a dog is stressed and we read it as energy, then we think we have to run it off, right? Try to exercise them out. But we're actually rehearsing and building a neural pathway of that, right? It lays in the brain. This is how we respond. And then you almost become a junkie. And what comes to mind to me is dogs who like to play ball, right? And they're like, it's repetitive, it's OCD-ish, they can't hear you and stuff like that. So that's why it becomes a little different and challenging when that happens. And yeah, the HPA access is like, this is the piece, like I said, I'm like, wow, biology, here we go, right? It's so important, and it's more important. And this is where some people say, oh, the dog just needs to run it off. They need energy. You'll see that and hear that in rescue dogs and so forth about, oh, they just need a big yard to run in. Not necessarily. It depends, right?
Yeah. Or I heard this one today too, which was somebody had a very barky dog in the crate, and their advice was just let them bark it out. They'll work it out.
Right.
It's like, first of all, it's a border collie, so don't do that, please. But right? No, because sometimes rehearsing that behavior because the dog is doing the behavior because of stress versus the dog doing that because I want attention. Dog's doing that because of stress. Again, like Lisa said, I am laying down that path over and over and over again. And guess what happens? This is what I do.
Right. And I think that's really important to understand, right? So look at the body language to guide your next action. And I think that's what we've all been very, very particular about. Like, there's no one way to train stuff, but you have to read the dog to help you guide you what your next path is. And so, so there's a dog that comes to me and for day school, and we've been doing a lot of this stuff ever since we went to the Resilience Rainbow. I'm like, let's test the theory. I'm curious to see, because I'm curious, like I'm always interested, like all of us, like, does this make a change? Like, are we seeing differences? And we've all worked on it in different ways to see, and we've conglomerated to talk about what's happening and what we see. And I'm going to tell you, like, this is, to me, it's a game changer. It is really, really a game changer. And I've done it with my own dogs, and I'm guilty. I'm not going to lie. I'm guilty of, working with other people's dogs, not my own. So what they talked about was, you have to find, when we talk about, like, and do you mind if I go into the decompression?
No, go for it.
Okay. So like the decompression part, right, is how you prepare to learn, right? And again, this is relative. So if there's a dog who's highly stressed, so today I had a dog who I was working with, and it was a puppy mill dog, 5 to 6 years old. It was just bred implicitly, like just crazy all over the place. It was kept in a stall. So its knowledge was limited from the time it was actually ever born, right? Now its life has changed completely. It's in a home and so forth. They've had her for a month and a half, and they're doing all the right things. I mean, really, they have very natural instincts in watching the dog to determine what to do. And they had a breakthrough the other night and I came to saw her today, and I'm like, yeah, keep doing what you're doing. There's really no learning that can occur right now. You have to build trust, develop predictability and patterns and routines so she knows what to expect. So then that creates a sense of safety and security. And then you can form social bonds. Hello, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? I mean, it's all basic stuff. And so just me walking out to that yard, the dog was just pacing nonstop. And I'm like, and I tossed some cookies, some novel treats. She looked at them, she smelled them, she looked at me, she's like, yeah, nice try. I can't do this right now, and kept moving. But then after a bit, when I didn't add a lot of stimulus and so forth, and auditory is a thing for whatever. So in this case, I said, let's work on lowering her concerns, right? Affecting her HPA access to help her be able to accept her new life. Right? Because I don't know about you, but like, this is where we go into like when people have a dog on leash, like there is, what is it? Like there's a difference between accepting and tolerating, right? So what does that look like, right? Accepting is, okay, let's keep going. I'm okay with this. Tolerating is like, I'm not going to bite you. I'm just going to wait until this stops, right? There's a difference.
And tolerating looks very different from a lot of different dogs, because I'm going to ask you guys how, just in terms of getting this to be able to think about it. How many of you guys think your dogs accept their nails getting done versus tolerate their nails getting done? And tolerating can be like, or it can also be like,
yep.
But I bet you no dogs like it. Well, I'm not saying no, but so think about the different levels of how tolerance can mask itself, right? And they're like, oh no, they don't mind. No. I bet they do.
Right. There's a difference.
I can barely tolerate.
And then even think about going to the vet. Do they tolerate it or do they accept it? Right. Yeah. And there's a level of confidence and there's a level of social support or relationship that goes along with that stuff. Like, I trust you that you're not going to put me in a bad situation. So, I think, so in this particular case, for going back, I'm sorry, I ran off on a tangent.
I interrupted you.
I know, that's okay. We do that. That's fine. But, so in this particular case, I said, you're going to do tons of sniffing. Like, so, my thought is that she likes to go outside. So they have a young son who is in percussion, drums, and the dog has never heard that before, ever. And even if they raise their voice, the dog paces and so forth and gets worried and then tries to go to the room where there's white noise that helps the dog not tolerate, or to be able to tolerate some of what's happening. So that's kind of her safe place, that or outside where there's less stuff, right? And I'm like, this poor dog, right? And I'm like, instead of like, let's find what decompresses her, I go, first of all, we need to get her HPA axis down to a point where she's not overly stressed about life, right? So sniffing does that, right? So there's studies about how sniffing lowers all the things in the dog to help them, whatever. There are some dogs that actually prefer more active decompression, such as tugging, playing ball, shredding things, stuff like that. So you have to know who your dog is. Learn your dog to determine, is this something to set them up to be able to learn? Or is it something that, like chewing, for example? So for my Dutchie, she likes to tug, and then she's like, okay. But if I overdo it, that puts her over her peak performance, right? Where she can't function. She's like, oh my God. And so then she has a hard time learning. So then I have to be mindful of that. And then I question, is this really decompressing for her? Or is this something else, right? Over arousal, blah, blah, blah. So you have to find the right match for who your dog is. Generally, sniffing works pretty well. Unless the dog is so concerned that they can't sniff, that's a whole nother story. Then you're working on safety and security, right? And so then it's sniffing, do your activity for peak performance, and then you complete the stress cycle. For her, it's chewing. After she's like, that was great. And then she falls asleep, right? So I think it's totally depends on the dog, right? My Papillon, for example, he likes shredding things. He's like, yeah, and I'm going to, whatever, I'm in the bathroom and he's like, you got the toilet paper roll, let's go. And he'll sit and he's like, do it. And so I pull out the toilet paper roll and he's like, shred. And I'm like, good. Can you do this? Can you do that? He's like, yeah. And then I toss a toy and he grabs the toy. And for him, me chasing with the toy is completing the stress cycle. He's like, I'm so strong. I got this toy. And he grabs it and he shakes it and runs away and comes back. And, learning your dog is so critical, right? And everybody's so unique and different. You have to identify what's their decompression, what's their completing the stress cycle, because they are different. Do you have anything about your guys that you've learned or have been looking for?
Yeah, it's funny. Like Bam seems more like your Dutchie, right? There's a very fine line and it's real small. Like I prefer something like quiet with him. And he's a toughie because, right, like things like relaxation protocol
annoy him.
He can lay down, but he's like,
yeah.
Is there a cookie? Is there another cookie? Like, he doesn't relax. He will relax at home when there's nothing going, like he's sleeping right now, but he doesn't have moments of like, I'm just chilling. He sleeps or he's waiting for the next thing to happen. And it's tough kind of living like that a little bit. But like Roscoe, for instance, sniffing's great. I'll show you a video of kind of what we talk about here, because I think his is the very basic. Lisa does something a little bit different. But it helps to prepare him for this stuff. Like even something as simple as coming into the crate room and trying to put a crate on him, he's already getting aroused and he bounces. And it's like, I'm not going to fight you to put your leash on. I need you to sit. And he's like, I can't. He tries really hard, and like getting mad at him to like, I'm not going to do it until you put your butt on the ground. It's not productive. Like, there are moments where I can do that, and I do still ask for it, but he tells me if it's like, if that's in my wheelhouse at the moment or not. And if it's not, I will usually let him out, and then we'll work a little more on, and he could do it a little better if he's out of confinement. So finding, again, and I've had him a year, but I'm still trying to find, because he's growing too. So I'm still trying to find those quirks of what work and help him. And so I think Fire's a dog who, like, when she gets stressed, food is not a thing. Like, I'm not eating, I'm not sniffing. I can't do it. You need to let me go be by myself, right? She's a little bit of an introvert in that, like, when stress hits her, she's like, I want your support and I want to be by you, but you got to just let me process this. Don't, like, I'm not into petting. I'm not into snuggling. Just let me lay at your feet or be close to you. And that's hard as a human because you want to help, right? But yeah, so like they're all different. And like, how do you find what works? You find it out by whether or not the dog will continue the activity, and not reduce arousal, but like basically kind of settle in, right? So if you start getting activation and more motion, googly eyes, right? Pacing, any of those types of things, you got to go the other direction because it's not working. Okay. So I think, do you want to get into some videos?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, so I'm gonna show, if you mind, I'll show the one of Roscoe first.
Absolutely.
Because I only have one. Lisa always has 900 because she videos everything she does. I should get
I'm
better.
trying.
So, okay. So because I know that we have a large nosework population that follows us. So I want to mention this for a minute, because when we talk about the art of sniffing, right? I want you to go all the way back of like food in a box. Okay. When we cut them off leash and we stayed way out of the picture and they just got to hunt for stuff. Okay. As soon as we start nose work, even if we're sort of out of the picture, now it's a game and they know the game and there's a right and there's a wrong kind of. And even if you're not like corrective of your dog, like, oh, what happened? But I feel like nose work helps a lot of dogs because they do it when they have agency. If you're somebody who's like, what about here? What about here? What about here? What about here? That's not the sniffing that we're talking about. And so when we get into the whole sniffing for stuff, it's not about eating the cookies, guys. Okay. So you'll see, like, I think Lisa used a rug or a snuffle mat. I have a makeshifty box because I didn't have anything else and I knew I could do it with what I had. And sometimes we like crumble up like the treats into dust. So it's not about like eating the treats. It's about the art of snuffling or
Smelling. Yeah.
Smelling. Thank you. All right. So I'm going to show you, I'll talk over this as I do it. But I tried this with Roscoe. It's kind of boring as everything is that we do here. All right. So let's see. So what I did is I have kind of like a banana box or a fruit box from like a Costco. So it has little handles down here and it's a little deep. So what I have is a little fleecy blanket. Okay, that's all I had. And I've put it in the box, kind of like set it in and crumpled it in. So there's all the little nooks and crannies of the blanket. And underneath of it and in all those little, spaces, there's kind of like liver dust or treat dust or whatever it is that you want to put in there that the dog will find interesting. And so you can kind of see here, it's not necessarily about like, I ate a cookie, where's the next one? He's very,
Well,
very,
his motions are methodical and smooth, right? He's
Yes.
searching, and that's what's really important to understand about this, I think.
Yeah, no, one thing I will tell you I would change about this is if you watch the little bits of this when this box moves, he doesn't like it. There's real, I know you might not see that. There's very small subtleties into his movements, but you see there,
Well,
like it,
lift up and move away, right?
yeah, he's like, oh, I don't like that so much. So I would potentially lock the box down somehow to prevent movements. And was it terrible? No, he went right back to doing what he was doing. So it was not awful. But if I was doing this with a new dog, I would want to remove what that was. So if you see, and I sort of did this on purpose, right? This has treats in it. So a regular Snoop that he can push around and he knows the game and treats fall out, he didn't choose that. He walked up and he was like, oh, what's this? And he spent 1 minute and 20 seconds in there, right? And if I had had more nooks and crannies, I bet you, or I would have reloaded the box while he was still in there, I could have kept him in there for probably a few more minutes, right? So, and when you watch it, right, it's sort of, he's not eating and coming up and eating and coming up. He's very focused, smooth, breathing's really nice and calm. So he's just having his own little day right there. Just totally into it. And when I watched this and we talked about like sports, right? And kind of that kind of stress for sports, it reminds me of watching the Olympics when Michael Phelps was there. And if you ever watched, he would have his iPod in every time, right? And he was just he was in his own little world, doing his own little thing. And whatever that did for him, decompression, right? It put him in that mindset and that zone to be able to reach his peak performance. And he did. So.
And the thing is too, is right, remember, predictability and routine and patterns are super important. So the more you keep some of this stuff up, you're going to see a change in the performance of the dog, period, because it's what you do, right? And I think that this is good. It's a healthy habit for any dog, regardless. If you have a dog who runs high, or super stressy or super like jolty and stuff like that, those are some things that you want to think about, like instilling some of that ability to breathe. Like how many times, and I'm guilty of it. Like sometimes when I get stressed out, I'm like, I don't breathe. I stop breathing, and I'm like, right. And it's crazy because then I'm like, okay, we have to breathe. I literally have to remind myself to breathe. But for dogs, they don't have that. So we need to support them that way. But the predictability provides a sense of security. Then you have the social support. Then you have the agency. So it affects all aspects of what we worked on, which was the resilience rainbow, which I think is pretty cool. And that was really the autonomy and the ability, right? There's a difference when you have a gun to your head and they're like, no, I'm going to touch you now. And you're like, I'm not okay with it, but I might get hurt. Therefore, I'll let it happen. That's your tolerating versus allowing, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Or even so, like, I don't want to sniff that box. Come on. Right. Come on. There's good stuff in here.
That's
sniff
pressure.
It. Like, right. It is pressure. Like, even though you're trying to help the dog and do good by it, it's, if they say no, I believe them. So
I'll go through stuff. So we do this, and since this, it's really changed a lot of what we do. I will show you a dog, and there's a pattern game that we do, the up and down game. It's Leslie McDivitt. She has some really good pattern games, and you have to really understand why she does what she does. But let me see. Just bear with me because I'm not as fluent in everything I do. Share screen. Okay, I'm going to go.
Don't worry, tech support's here. I got you.
I know, tech support. We got you. So I'm going to show you a video. So here we have a lab, and she's super smart puppy. So Ruby is a young pup. And we're doing some mat training. I didn't have a snuffle mat at this time, so I just used this fuzzy little thing. and we didn't like, you really want to try to get it like into the mat so the dog sniffs it. But initially, if the dog is learning something, you want to make it as easy as possible to get buy-in, right? So now she's like, this is great.
You're not sharing.
Oh, shoot. I'm sorry. Oh,
sorry. I was like, maybe she's going to hit play.
I thought I did.
Setting up the picture, but.
Oh yeah, hold on. So we have, how about now? Tell me.
Yep.
Gotcha. Okay. So this is Ruby. She comes in and she's a lab that is very, she's bred for hunting, right? So she runs high. She's like, let's go, let's do stuff. And so you already know that she runs more stressy. So I want to help her be a little more thoughtful. And so here she is, and she comes out of a crate, and then the trainer goes ahead and takes her. There's a snuffle-ish type of mat. This isn't really a snuffle mat, but it's a thing where she can actually go to and check out what's in there. So we did crumbling dust and stuff like that. She's very foodie, so she's going in on it. We have a steady surface for her to stand on because that's super important. Is remember, you don't want to add more questions to the easy to something that should be very simple. So this is why sometimes I like scatter feeds in the grass. I found it depends on the dog because we've done it that way. And sometimes if the wind flows different directions, it can knock the dog off the scent and then they're distractible. So I do really like the snuffle mat in a box because it contains all the smells and so forth. So we're just going to let her go through this. And she is a dog that'll jump up, grab the leash. She gets super excited. She goes between legs, which is not unheard of for who she is. And so she's there just snuffling away. And I think we do this for a bit. But the licking too is, right, the repetitive behavior, I think, is something that you want to look for as well. And she's totally into this. This dog... Go ahead.
I just want to add one thing, right? So because like you can see the dog still really at you watch the licking, right? Boom, 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 boom. To get this to go on longer because she's still so into it, just sprinkle more on the other side when the dog's head's on the other side. Okay. Right. So you can, it's not like one and done. You can keep this going for as long as the dog's willing.
Right.
All right. Go ahead, Lisa.
Yeah, no, perfect. And then we did this a couple of times with her. So this is why the video is like 8 minutes long, because we go in from decompression, then we do some work, and then we go back to completing the stress cycle, which goes back to sniffing, because that seems, I think what's interesting, or at least it's something to note, is that if the dog is used to commands, right? They're always looking to their owner. And I think what's nice about snuffle mats and things like this is that it gives the dog the autonomy to not be on, right? And being on all the time, I don't know about you guys, like when we do classes and we're observing and so forth, it's very challenging. So now she's going to do some more. Oh, no, she takes her off. So look at the motion, which is really good for Miss Ruby here because Ruby is really an active girl. Now she's doing the up and down game, orientation cookie. It's not eye contact. We can get to that point, but right now this is, can you pay, orient. So she's noticing me, watch her motions. When do they slow down, right? Does the handlers dropping the treats affect the dog's behavior? Most likely, yes, in all cases, just because depending on who the owner is. But you can see some thoughtfulness flow over her, wash over her a little bit here and there. That was one. And the trainer went ahead and slowed down a little bit as well.
And I think you might have already said this, but just in case you didn't, I want you to think about how predictable this game is.
Yes,
so,
highly.
Right? Predictability was one of the segments. Don't forget.
So, and placement of reinforcement. So then she's doing pretty well. And I was like, this is pretty cool. And Ruby likes people. She likes things. She likes doing things. So I'm just moving around a little bit without any motion. You see just my movement arouses her, right? She gets up again. And her body language is high. She thought about sitting, right? And I might have thought about slowing this down a bit to see, right? But we're trying to build, she's a young dog. We're trying to build a pattern of expectation, predictability to get her to a point where she's like, okay. So the rate of reinforcement's pretty regular right now. Hi, lady, but I'm doing something and I'm eating cookies. So I add a little proximity. I don't think I was talking at that time, but I work up to talking. But see right there, I mean, so all of a sudden she's like, oh yeah, who cares? We're together, right? And moving forward in further sessions, I might slow some of this down. But this is her first time doing this. Like this is, and there was a good thought. She was like, hey, ho, what are we doing? And she kind of came back to her owner or her person at that time that was handling her.
And so just so
that.
you guys think about it, right? This seems like you're just feeding the dog.
Right.
Yeah, we are. Absolutely. But you're creating these games that help this HPA axis slow down or process, right? And so, you know, look at how slower she is now. Yes, she's licking, but you're not getting those really hard head hits into that mat anymore.
Right.
Now she's like, oh, yum.
And I did this with all the dogs. Now look around. There's a bunch of dogs here. And she's like, who cares? And everybody else, because we've done this with the other dogs, they're all like, yeah, who cares, right? How many of the dogs that we know that do sports have FOMO, right? And they're like, yeah, let's go. This is something to consider to incorporate, right? And so she brings it down. And she's one of our puppies that we've done this with. There's another one that came and we work with, and he's a little active guy as well. But Ruby is a nonstop action dog. Like she's like, let's go, let's do stuff. But yeah, watch her behavior. All this stuff starts slowing her down, and her licking and everything is much more fluid, right? Mm-hmm. So think about body language and fluidity versus short and choppy.
And again, if you notice the mat too, there was maybe like 4 or 5 actual cookies on there, and look how all the dust, right? And the dog is still focused on that stuff.
Right.
So I find it the most interesting because we like to think sometimes, right? Dogs are in it for the food. Oh, this dog's just really foodie. I promise not. Like, I mean, I think the dogs find it very decompressing as well. I mean, clearly to get the results that we do and to keep them involved for so long. But right, if it was just about a food thing, they might not work that hard for all that little dust in between all the fibers of the rug. But I think, and without showing you 100 videos, you know, I think we're seeing the dogs are committed to this. They're like, oh, this is great. I love it. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And then she went right into a crate on this. We stopped it. She also had class afterward. And I will tell you, she was fantastic. Like,
that's awesome.
Yeah, it was really cool to see her. And everyone's like, ooh, look at her. And I'm like, no. She came to day school. And we worked some stuff. And then all we're doing is transferring to say, this is what we do. So that was pretty cool. I'll share some more. Give me a minute here. So we had a little puppy, and the puppy came. This puppy was... he was jumping and so forth. We did some other games with him, but here is one that I'm just going to pull it up, and then I'm going to share. This is one where he was, so he was jumping up. He was grabbing the people's hair and so forth. You know, typical puppy. He's 4.5 months old, so he came and stayed here. So here he is doing a snuffle. Now this is a little different snuffle, Matt, so it's deeper. So he really has to get into the grooves. And mind you, there's other dogs sitting and watching. They're like, hey, no FOMO going on here. They're like, our turn's coming. We've worked this. And so he does this, and you see the video's over 4 minutes, just over. And then we do, what do we do with him on this? I forgot. I think this is the on-off game or something where we get excited. So he finished sniffing, then he does this little cameo, goes back to sniffing. I'm not sure what's happening there. I think oh, So she takes the snuffle mat up, and he's like, okay, what are we doing? But look at a little more engagement, a little more interest. And then she's trying to get him to play the on-off game, moving the cookie and so forth. And this is Suzanne's, like, it's no different than the freeze dance game for kids. And then she slows him down, and he's like, okay. His motions come up and come down. So this is like little resilience training. And then you wait until he comes down a bit longer, and then you can rev him up again. Because his issue is he gets high, and then he goes nuts, right? Starts grabbing, biting, mouthing, and stuff like that. So if they sit down on the couch, he gets all jumping up on it, right? And so we're trying to help him learn the up and down, how to get excited and how to come back down. Now, and he's trying, right? So you pay effort on this. And so some of this stuff, you want to think about how quickly you're moving, what you're doing with it, and all that. And then, oops, a little slippage. Sorry, buddy. You can do the same thing with tugging, right? Get excited, tug, 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 stop, make it dead. And then that's what we were working on for him. And then she's like, okay, we need to snuffle again, right? He's like, okay.
And so I think you're calling it the up down, not what did you call it? Not the up down game. That was the other one.
On-off game, right? On-off game, Suzanne, I think.
Yeah. So
like that.
So what I want you guys to think about is like arousal plays a part in everything, right? Whether or not it's like, oh, you're going to open the door to go potty, right?
Yep.
To we're playing a sport, to I'm fearful, right? And so we don't think about helping our dogs with that unless they have a problem with it, right? And so I think this is such a good game to play because what better way to make a dog be able to deal with life better than to be like, sometimes we get excited and then let's be quiet. And then sometimes we get excited. And that's all this game is I want to bring the dog up to where they're pushing that line of productivity, right? And then you're like, okay, stop. And they're like, wait, what? Wait, what? And so you want to teach them, like, we're going to push you to the edge and then I need you to chill. And you will see very quickly the dogs that are like, okay, give me a second, right? And then there's dogs that are like, can't do it, right? And so those dogs, when we play this game, instead of like, yeah, chase a cookie and chase a cookie and chase a cookie, we might be like, see this cookie? Do you want it? Okay, stop. Right? And so you just alter, because if my dog's spike goes up to here, then I'm a blip, right? I need to make it a tiny little blip where this dog's like, okay, I can come here and I can come back down. So yeah. So I think I know you have more videos, but
of course I do.
Well, because, and we'll show more, but I want to make sure that we hit the part about 4th of July, right? Because I know that's why some people tuned in tonight. Then I have a dog that is a really, really, really hard time with it. I don't know. Lisa, does anyone in your house hate it?
Actually, yes, my border collie. Shocking.
Imagine that.
Imagine.
The one in my house that hates it. Everyone else is like, whatever.
Yeah.
So there's never a thing that I'm gonna do to make fireworks okay for her.
You're not going to desensitize and counter condition, as you're saying, right?
No habitualization, none of that. We're not doing any of that, right? And I will tell you, this year I already know is going to be particularly hard because she's losing more hearing.
Yeah.
And she's starting to lose some vision. And so when we start taking away deficits and adding stress, they are going to process it less productively. Okay. Right. So I think this will probably be our worst year ever. I will be doing these things, right? I will have the chews. I will have the snuffle mat. We might do some nose work during the day and just let her go out and sniff, 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 and really kind of get her mentally tired that way. Because at least if you're a little like, I've done all the things, I'm not sitting at that, what are we doing next moment? I'm ready to de-stress because I've had my moment of of mental stimulation without the stress part about it. So, being able to do these games that we have already showed you today, right? Even if you don't have a snuffle mat, do you have a blanket? Do you have a box? Do you have a rolled up towel? Do you have an old box that you can, put some treats in? And if you're a shredder, like let them shred the box apart. I'm trying to think of other things you can do during the lick, if you're a licker, the topples or the Kongs.
The other thing too is think about white noise, right? And maybe put them into a different area whereby there is like if upstairs is harder, like downstairs in the basement or whatever, that you can go and hang out where you watch TV or whatever. So, or a room that doesn't have outside walls, right? So those are some things to think about. Like we are at a critical point right now where, going and getting something to help your dog through is a little late, right? Mm-hmm. If you wanted to really take an effect and do stuff, you needed to have been doing a lot of the stuff, but setting a pattern starting now, saying, okay, maybe the fireworks at my place starts at 5. Well, guess what? 4 o'clock, we're going to go outside. We're going to do some sniffing. We're going to come in. We're going to do some, hanging out downstairs. We might do some little decompression, completing the stress cycle because that was tricky. I'll do some white noise. We might, play some TV, whatever. Right? But starting that routine right now is going to be critical. But remember, predictability in the fact that this is what we do when, so that the brain, and I thought this was interesting. This was interesting. If you have a teenage dog, right? The HPA axis is twice as active as any other time in their lives. And the prefrontal cortex, which is learning, it is not as available and receptive to learning at that time because the HPA axis, the emotions that come out of it, override learning, right? And I think that's so interesting. Like how many times we try to say, just suck it up, or you correct them for it, or whatever. Well, they're not receiving depending on what their age is, right? For teenage time, 6 months to about 2.5 years. And so that was really cool because I didn't realize that. And that was fascinating to me. But starting your routines and predictability patterns of precedence are super important right now.
Mm-hmm. And again, this does not take the place. She is a trazodone dog. We will be doped up. But if I can do all that pre-trazodone, hopefully that will keep her a little more, out of that super stressy zone. Now, the other thing that I want to mention to you guys, and this was Dr. Kathy Murphy kind of explained this in a better way. Cortisol will eat your glucose. Yep. in layman's terms, right? And so if all of the glucose is gone, it drops your blood sugar, right? So when you have really, really high times of stress, your dog needs more food.
Yep.
Okay. So even if you have, your dog's trying to lose weight, this stuff, if they are really a firework dog and they super, super duper stress, I might feed them a little more breakfast the next day, right? Because what you want to do, because we all know fireworks aren't one day, right? So, and the longer it goes on, right, and they don't get the chance to complete that stress cycle, which I'm going to be fair, for something like fireworks, they're not going to get, if you have a really fearful dog, they will not complete their stress cycle in the day, even with all these things.
Right.
We're just trying to help. But another way to help without helping, you can give them maybe a little bit of extra food to help give them more fuel to help process all of those chemicals. Mm-hmm. Okay. So that's another thing. And one other thing that I really, really want to mention, and this is a Dr. Kim Brophy thing, is a hack with the white noise. Okay. And so I thought this was super interesting from a sound wave perspective. So she talks about like using a white noise machine or turning up your television or turning a fan on. And she said they sort of tested it, and what works best is to have your noisemaker over on this side of the room, and then to have a fan kind of on this side of the room pointing against the wall. Okay. And so what happens is when the noisemaker is on one side of the room, the dog knows. Okay. And if the fireworks are coming from this side of the room, it's still very clear that there's two things happening. So when the noisemaker's here and the fan's over here pointing against the wall, it starts to create this kind of I don't know what you want to call it, like breakup of sound, bouncing off the blades of the moving the air, bouncing off the wall for the dog, because their sense of hearing is so much more acute than ours. It does really help kind of break up that outside noise, and storms too, right? Fireworks, storms, anything loud that's going on outside. So again, I'll say that, like TV or noise or radio or something on one side, take a box fan. Okay. And they did say box fans work best. You can get them for like $10 at Walmart, Target, whatever. Point it at the wall. Okay. And you can turn it on high and just let it cycle up against the wall. And then that will kind of come off.
So Jessica Parks wrote, how would you handle it if you have dogs and it's their first 4th of July, or you don't know what the reaction is in the past? I have 2 fosters, 10-month-old and a 4-year-old who was neglected, plus my first 4th with Kobe. I think.
Good question.
Yeah, it is. But set a pattern of predictability, right?
Yep.
Start with what, like, I think a lot of times we go, let's see what happens. But then if it turns out to be, hell in a handbasket, well, then you're like, crap. So I think then you have to look at what is going to work and set it up, right? You don't know what's going to work. It may or may not work, but it's better to be a little preemptive, I think, at times.
Yep.
Like, this is not going to harm anything if you do this, right?
Yep. So I would do the things that we talked about. I would potentially, even if you don't want to set up the box fan idea, I would potentially like put a nice movie in or turn the radio on. For me, I do close the blinds when and if it's dark, like if the moon's out, it's not so bad, but because as the dogs lose a little bit of hearing, I feel like the visual can be a little more impactful to them. So I don't want any booms or pops. The noise is enough. I don't need the visual cue as well. So I will close my blinds and curtains. Go for a walk if that's what your dog's like. Let them do the snuffle mat, the sniffing. If it's a nice day and nobody's lighting off fireworks, go for a swim if your dog enjoys that, right? It's a nice, great physical activity. Anything during the day that you can do to kind of let your dog do their thing. And if you go for that walk, right, and you don't want to do the snuffle mat or you don't want to do the things like that, go for a sniff walk and just let the dog sniff every little blade of grass around your neighborhood. That's, as long as they're cool with walks and walks are pretty low stress, that's another great way of something you do. Go for a hike. Let them go in the woods and sniff every leaf, right? That's another similar way that you can kind of use that little sniffy mat. You can still put the predictable activities on, that up down game. Just really nice ways to give the dog, let the dog understand what's coming next.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, remember, regardless of what the situation is, I think what's really important to realize is that predictability provides a sense of safety and security, right? Mm-hmm. Knowing what comes next helps you cope, right? And I think, like, my life is like, I try to keep things as predictable as possible. And I try for my dogs, like, we do things in a certain order because, and I thought it was just more management, but at the same time, it's management or not, doesn't matter. It works for us, right? So whatever works for you is what you need to do, regardless of what people say. Sometimes it's not about training and trying to change the dog's mind. Sometimes it's about coping skills. And maybe once you develop your coping skills or your resilience, muscle, so to speak, then you can worry about training. Like, it's okay. Like, and I think that's what's important to understand. Like, they need predictability. That's the only way. That's how kids develop. They know what's coming next. Like, kids grow up, and the more security and predictability they have in their life is really, really good. Right?
Sarah says, our family usually goes to watch fireworks. Would it be okay to leave a puppy with a TV and fan on when we leave, or should someone stay home? You won't know until you know, right? And that's the really hard part about it, is like, you would hate to say, I mean, I love fireworks. I really do. I enjoy watching them. I hate them now because I have dogs that don't like them. I wish people would stick to, let's do 2 days, right? Let's do the 3rd and the 4th, or the 4th and the 5th, or whatever it is. And let us have our moments to protect our dogs. But if you're not sure how your puppy will react, I would absolutely do the TV and the fan. And worst case scenario, doesn't matter. You didn't need it. It's not going to hurt anything.
Right. And Sarah's the mom of Digby, the little white and brown boy.
Cute.
Yeah. So that's why she wrote cute dog. Yeah, I get it. He is. But I think Joanne's right. Yeah. I mean, the more you can layer stuff, right, is better for the dog. And if it works, it works. And then also have a camera to monitor it, right?
Yep.
That's the other thing I think is important is like, how do you know your dog is okay or not? And when the storms hit and I realized how I'm like, crap, I'm going to need to do a little bit more for my border collie because I was hoping we were okay with that. But I realized today and last night was a lot for him. Mm-hmm. He was literally trying to crawl underneath me. And I'm like, crap, right? So now I'm like, I have to do more for him, and it's in his best interest. Because remember, stress lowers our length of life too, right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, whatever works for him. You don't have to have anybody stay with him. You can maybe be able to leave just in case he's panicking, but have a video or have this ability to check in.
Yep. The other thing I would say too is if he's good with it, like a bully stick, nice big bully stick that will get him through an hour or two. And, or if you're worried about him swallowing something like a frozen Kong or a frozen licky something, right? To just give him something to do while you're gone, should that start. So just toss the kitchen sink at him, really. And again, what's the worst case? If he doesn't have any problems and he sleeps, like, yay for you. You got a bunch of extra treats today.
Right.
So I don't want to leave us on a downer here, but I do want to mention it because there is a thing called trigger stacking, guys. Okay. And so when we talk about day after day of this stuff, sometimes like last year for me here, it was like a war zone. Actually, no, it was 2 years ago. It was COVID because nobody had anything else to do but light off fireworks. So it was awful. And it went on for like 2 weeks, right? It was like there was no reprieve from it. And thankfully, I only had one dog to worry about. And I mean, it was really, really tough for her. But at least I knew I could do whatever I could do to help her. And this too shall pass, right? So I mention this because let's say you live in a house where sometimes you get snarky dogs, or sometimes, you every once in a while you have that little tiff where they get snotty with each other or snarky or whatever. And, you might have a fight here or there and nothing serious. I want you to understand during these times, those things are much more likely to occur, and maybe not during firework time, but the next day.
Right.
Okay. So there's nothing wrong with a little extra crate time and a little extra treats, right? Like get some bully sticks, get some frozen Kongs, get some special stuff that they can have during this time, because they're going to want to sleep a little extra. Most of them, even if they're not afraid of it, they're not going to get their normal sleep cycle because of how long fireworks go on, unless you live in the middle of the country. So when we talk about that predictability factor, I'm going to give you guys an example too, right? I am a very low stress person. Not a lot gets to me. Had a really stressful 2 weeks at work, and I was dealing with it. It's fine, right? Like I'm here, I'm in the weekend. It's great. I had actually booked a massage for Friday. And so I was like, took off a little early. I was ready to have that. And so on my way there, the bridge to cross over into Iowa was under construction. I'm like, it's one lane, no problem, right? So I get off the bridge and I go down the other, and there's a road closed. I'm like, okay, so I got to get off that, and then I have to go up a different way. And then I was behind somebody who was like stopping for 25 seconds at every stop sign. And I was like, go, right? And now I feel like I'm going to be a little late because you've altered my path. And I went again, and there was more construction. And then there was there's four sets of construction. So by the time I get to my relaxing massage, I was like,
you're like white knuckling it.
I was. And I walked in there and I'm like, you got to give me a minute. I'll get in my space in just a second. But right now I was like, It was funny. It was road construction. Like, who cares? I got to where I needed to be, but you took my predictability away, and then you took it away again and again and again. And now you're building all those triggers on top of each other. Now imagine something happened or they were closed or something like that, right? Like, as someone who doesn't usually go over the top, I was already feeling pretty above my level by the time I got there. So those kind of things can happen to your dogs too. And none of that was bad or out of the ordinary or whatever. So what? I took a different route. Everything happened fine. And sometimes we say that to our dogs, not taking into consideration, yeah, but it wasn't what I'm used to. It wasn't my normal routine.
Right.
So,
and I think that's important, right? When you talk about this, part of the resilience rainbow is building that muscle of resilience, right?
yep.
And how you do it is through those different domains and particular exercises to help the dog build that and flex through the times of stress, right?
Mm-hmm.
Allostasis is important, peak performance, but without being knocked out of it. So it is, and I've been there too. Like, I'm like, I get to my, and I do, it's the one thing I do for myself is massage. And I'm like, give me a minute. Sometimes I'm like, because if you touch me, I think I'm going to jump off the table. So, but I've gotten better because it's taken me a while. And for somebody who doesn't like to be touched, I'm not even joking. I'm not a hugger. Like, people don't know that about me who don't know me, right? Those who know me, they're like, yeah, don't touch her. She don't like it. And it's just invasive to me, but I'll totally take, like, I'm a massage whore. I'm like, yeah, keep going. Right. And so, but like, she knows, like, oh, you're a little bit much today. So, but I get it. Yeah. And you're right. I don't think we allow our dogs that.
Not very often, right? Like, it's fine. You're fine. Nothing bad happened. Nothing bad happened to me either. And let me tell you, but
right.
Yeah, Jason says they're very affordable cameras on Amazon that will let you know if barking or movement. Very affordable, gives you a video feed on phone. Yep. I have the Blink cameras and I got them on a deal. They're like little squares. They're not even much bigger than that. I got 2 for like $35 and you can arm them if you want them to give you a motion, or you can, I leave them at disarmed because I work from home a lot. But if I'm going to be gone for a while or I really want to check on something, I will arm my camera and it will ping me every time there's motion. Right. So,
yeah. And I do too. I have cameras in different places, including my dog room, just because some of my dogs sleep in the crates. And then, like, for Tenor, I really watch him when there's storms. It was interesting last night. His routine was not the same. I have another dog in his crate and he was out and about, and he actually was much worse because he didn't have the predictability. It's crazy, the things that we don't realize. And I'm like, crap, I suck. Sorry. I'm sorry. You know?
It's all we can do sometimes is apologize and try and do better, right? I mean, I think if you ask Lisa and I, that's pretty much our training career. Every time we look back a year, we're like, I'm sorry. I'm doing better now. I'm doing better for all the dogs that come after you. So
100%.
Yeah.
Sure.
So do you guys out there have any questions about anything we talked about? Anything you don't understand? Anything? Fireworks are just, it's such a hard time of year. I think this is the hardest time of year for dogs, I think. And again, I think we say it, most of you guys know it. If you have that super fearful dog, don't let them into your yard, even if it's fenced. Just take them out on a leash, because if they bolt, I mean, fear. I think you guys have heard me tell this story once. Like, I was in a haunted house and you know it's fake, right? Like, you go there and you know it's fake. And at the very end, like, the chainsaw guy came running after me and I literally ran through a wall.
Yeah.
I busted down some wood and I fell, and the guy like takes his mask off. Are you okay? I'm like, yeah, sorry. But the adrenaline can make you do really crazy things, like Superman, right? Leap single bounds, break through walls. So just be extra careful for
and I mean, and ultimately, worst case, like, if they pee in your house or poop in your house, is that the worst thing in the world? Right. I'll take that over my dog fleeing out of fear and being gone for a period of time. So also microchips, right? And then look at just different supplements to see if they can help them. We're running up on time. So you always want to try stuff before you actually need them to determine whether or not they actually work for your dog. So at this point, if you don't have anything, you can still try stuff, but try it before the fireworks to make sure that it's going to help and not hinder, because I've heard of some things potentially going the opposite direction we think they should go. So
and I would also just caution you, if you are a trazodone user, and if you haven't like, if you are somebody whose dog gets 10 days and you got your dog on trazodone for 10 days, I'm going to tell you, be careful, because you never know. But if after 3 days your dog is like, Do you see that? There really truly might be like a purple dinosaur in the corner that they see. It can be a little bit like hallucinogenic mushrooms over time, right? Where dogs can like see things that happen. So which can almost be worse, right? They're tripping and hallucinating on trazodone. You might want to say like, hey, vet, let's try something else next time. There's lots of other things. Cilio gel, Xanax, I start my dog, I start her on calming care in June, like in the beginning of June, just so I can have that build up. They do make like rough muffs, which are ear muffs. I haven't tried those. I don't know. Maybe it'd be worth a try. I probably should do that, although next year she might be deaf. So who knows? But yeah, I don't know. Did I miss anything? Like what else? There's other.
No, I think you've covered it, right? I mean, I think we're at the tipping point, right? We got not much time left, so. And you're right. Yeah. Muffs didn't work. Yeah. I mean, it's all relative to the individual, right? And that's why you have to try stuff well before in advance you actually need it. And honestly, like, I'm not the best at planning everything that happens in my life either. So at this point, if you don't have it, then soft classical music. Yeah. And a fan. Good. Yep. Right.
And Jason's right. Check your gates and fence before letting your dog out. It's a huge lost dog night. I think it's one of the largest lost pet nights. And I'm going to tell you guys something. I don't want to like put panic out there, but the shelters are full everywhere. Yep. So there's nowhere for these dogs to go. So, right, as they find them, your dog might be in a crate. So like, if you have lost your dog, go to the shelter. Don't just wait and like do Facebook stuff. Get in your car and go, because shelters are already at max capacity. And then with the influx of lost dogs over 4th of July, it's just
microchip your dogs if you haven't already, because if they do get lost, they will try to scan them.
Yep. And then collars, I'm not a tag person, but if you go get some made at a Petco, they make them right there in the little machine. Maybe pop one on your dog just for the next couple of days, just in case. So
sure. Absolutely. Well, good luck. I hope everybody comes out of this okay, right? Or at least the best you can, right? I mean, it's not my favorite time of the year. Honestly, I like the pretty looks of the fireworks, but the booms bother me, and I'm not a fan. I wish they were not legal in our country, truly and honestly. And it's not just for my own personal, but for our veterans, right, that are suffering from PTSD. I have 8 brothers, and 6 of them have been through some sort of, altercation during their careers in the armed forces. And I can't imagine that, like living in that environment and what could set off, on top of what it does to nature. So it's not my favorite. It just never has been. So.
Yeah. One last one, Jason. That's a really good idea. If you don't have money to get a tag, write your name and number in Sharpie on a nylon collar, or if you have like painter's tape or masking tape or even something like that, you can even put a couple of them on there with a name and phone number, and just like double the tape over on itself so it sticks to itself. Cheap, nice way to make sure that your dog has some sort of identification on. So
great.
All right, you guys. Well, we hope this was informative. We hope we gave you some ideas. And even if you don't use it for 4th of July, you can use this for anything, remember. So hopefully it was good information for you. Happy 4th of July. Fire says I hate it, but
I'm with you.
All right. Have a good evening, you guys.
Take care.
Bye.